All right, it's 7:05. Welcome everyone, good evening, and welcome to collaboration between TSMA and the Thoracic Surgery Directors Association. Our event is the Cardiothoracic Surgery Residency application process for medical students, how to navigate the process and new initiatives. My name is John Truffles and I'm the TSMA president for this new term. And I'd like to just take a second to announce the rest of the executive board. Sammy Hsu is our new vice president. Benjamin Shao is our treasurer and Gianna DeFlizio is our new secretary. I wanted to just welcome everyone to this really exciting event that we're looking forward to sharing a lot of new information that we hope will be helpful for all of our members. And I wanted to just express our gratitude to the TSDA for their collaboration with us and hosting this wonderful event. I'll turn it over to Gianna now.
Yes, thank you all so much for coming today. We're so excited to be putting on this event and we're happy to have you here. Just a little bit about the event. So we've had 195 people register and right now we have over 100 attendees. So we're glad to see that this is reaching a lot of people today. As John mentioned, this is a collaboration with the Thoracic Surgery Directors Association, or TSDA, and that's an organization for the Cardiothoracic Surgery Residency Program Directors. So it's really the perfect source to be presenting this information to you all today. Our two moderators are both on the TSDA leadership. Dr. Yang is a professor of surgery and medical oncology at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, and he's also on the executive committee of TSDA. And Dr. Milewski is an associate professor of surgery at the Yale School of Medicine, where she's also the program director. And she's on our TSMA advisory board, as well as the TSDA executive committee. Thank you again so much to the TSDA for being willing to put on this event with us. We're so glad to have your input and your advice moving forward in the application process and for just students really everywhere. So thank you all. And I will now hand it over to our moderators.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Rita Milewski, and as Gianna said, I'm an associate professor of cardiac surgery and the program director at Yale. And both I and Dr. Yang will be your moderators this evening. We'd like to welcome all of the medical student participants to this informative webinar this evening on basically cardiothoracic surgery residency, the application process for medical students. It's important to know how to navigate this process, and there are some new initiatives this year that we'd like to introduce to you as well. Tonight's presentation is, as stated, a result of a partnership between the TSMA and the TSDA to develop this webinar, and we'd like to take this opportunity to thank Adam Doty and Gracie Martin, our excellent staff from the TSDA, without whom this presentation would not have been possible. We have an excellent expert panel this evening to discuss many of the questions that arise when applying for cardiothoracic residency. The format and the agenda for this evening includes 4 excellent 10-minute presentations by our panelists, and the presentations will include the application process for I-6 programs, the 2024 ERAS application season program signaling, the universal offer date, and also general surgery versus 4-3 programs versus I-6 programs. Following these presentations, there will be a live discussion, and we invite all the attendees to participate in the live discussion by using the Q&A functionality. The moderators and the panelists have been assigned to monitor these questions from the webinar attendees, so they will either be answered in the Q&A or they will be answered live. Dr. Yang.
Well, great. Thank you, Dr. Milewski. And again, welcome and good evening to everybody. And I think we have some guests from overseas as well, so maybe a very early morning to you all. So my name is Steve Yang. I'm a professor of thoracic surgery, general thoracic surgery here at Johns Hopkins. I'm also the vice chair of professional development. On behalf of the TSDA, we also do want to congratulate the TSMA for their hard work, and also to our assistants, Adam Doty and Gracie Martin, for their help on the TSDA side. My hat with the TSDA, I'm the president-elect and will assume the position in about 2 years. And we're also graced to have several excellent panelists tonight, as Dr. Milewski said. First will be Jason Hahn, who himself is a senior in the integrated I6 program at University of Pennsylvania. He's also secretary for the Thoracic Surgery Residents Association. So there's the TSDA, the TSRA, and the TSMA. So you see there's very heavy organizations who's helping with your interest in cardiothoracic surgery. So Jason's going to talk a little bit about the application process for the I6 program. And then our current president of the TSDA, Dr. David Cooke, who's also the program director in chief at the University of California, Davis, will be talking about the program signaling issues around the ERAS applications. Then will come Kathleen Berfield, who's the program director at the University of Washington in Seattle, and we'll talk about a new concept that the TSDA has been engaged in about a universal interview offer date. So that sort of concentrates all the offer dates in several days. And then finally, Betty Tong, the newly appointed program director at Duke University, I'm very proud to say, who will be talking about the different types of programs and how you should apply to those. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Jason Hahn to come on and talk about the application process for I6 programs. Jason.
I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak to you all tonight. And it's really a pleasure to be addressing so many people who are showing interest in the field of CT surgery, which I think is such a great career path. My talk is specifically about the application process for I6 programs. That's the integrated pathway. And my name is Jason Hahn, and I'm currently in my 5th out of 6 years of clinical training at the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. Of course, I think everyone's wondering, how can I be successful in the application process? And admittedly, it is a very competitive process. The I6 thoracic surgery is a small community that consists of, about 35 programs and about 46 to 47 positions, according to the last 2 years of match results. There tend to be a little over 100 applicants each year, which makes it less than a 50% match rate. And in addition to it being a highly competitive process, CT training, as you know, the environment can be highly variable, and committing to 6 to 8 years at any institution is a long time. So it is natural for everyone to be wondering how you can succeed in the process. Starting with the decision on where to apply, it's a highly multifactorial one. But from my perspective and experience, I think it's first very important to spend some time getting to understand the programs to the point that you can begin to form some buckets and categories of what types of programs may be out there for you. In terms of broad ways of thinking about what they offer, obviously the operative experience is paramount. And some of the ways that you can begin to tease away at this area is to ask, how many cases do residents graduate with? You can maybe even ask to see their case logs. How many do they get in their chief year, and what the case breakdown is like? What's the spread? And if you happen to be an applicant with a very specific subspecialty interest, this may be an especially important question for you. The educational structure and the way that people have thoughtfully put together this curriculum is also very important. Is there a helpful didactic program? Is there a mentorship structure? How do programs support those who may be struggling or falling behind? These are things that are difficult to ask, but very important and can become very relevant for anybody. Of course, culture and community is an important part of spending 6 to 8 years of really rigorous training years of your life. Programs are generally very small, and there may be a different sense of community among residents and attendings, depending on what that culture is. So, how do people interact with each other, both within and outside of the workplace? A lot of this you can begin to gather by having personal interactions with their residents and faculty. This is obviously easier to pick up on if you've spent any meaningful amount of time at these institutions, whether it be through an away rotation or an in-person interview date. And of course, I think it's worth asking about what the program has historically demonstrated or achieved. So where have their graduates ended up? What kind of pathways have they taken? Have they required or sought out additional super fellowships? Have they stayed in academia versus choosing other settings? And ultimately, does that align with your goals? There are, of course, countless questions that you can ask any institution, and some of the other ones that come up often are related to the amount of exposure to thoracic surgery versus cardiac surgery, versus other tenets of cardiology and maybe even vascular surgery. Included in that is your exposure to transcatheter procedures, which is going to become a very important aspect of your training. And I think you might be also curious to know, what are the composition of rotations? How much of it is off service, perhaps even off site? Does that require for you to provide your own transportation? Does that require you taking some time and spending it away from the main city where you may primarily reside? How is the case mix? And does the program offer any other sort of additional supplementary educational experiences such as simulation and other technical skills practice, support for attending conferences, opportunities to participate in research, and what kind of labs are available? These are all things that you may be curious to ask the programs that you're interviewing at. Just as important, I think you can spend even more time to understand yourself and what kind of learner you are. So for instance, what has been the most important factor in optimizing your learning or maintaining your wellness thus far in your academic career? And do you prefer having, for example, a lot of structure in your education or a lot of openness? Do you prefer taking on more of an entrepreneurial approach? And what are some of your negotiable and non-negotiable expectations when signing up for a residency? Obviously, programs can offer you a lot of extrinsic factors in your growth as a surgeon, but most of it, I believe, will come from you intrinsically. So you really want to be at a place where your attributes can thrive in the particular milieu that's offered. So understanding yourself is just as important as understanding the programs. Deciding when to interview and setting it up can be a massive logistical challenge. You're often going to find yourself inundated with emails, some of which can be very timely. If you have to travel for interviews, the cost, the time, and even conflicting dates can add another element of confusion. There will certainly be overlap between interview dates for some I6 programs and other programs, so you may have to plan accordingly. Dual applying is very common in CT surgery, given the fact that there's a very limited number of programs offered. And of course, there's multiple highly established ways of becoming a CT surgeon, including the traditional pathway. So people tend to dual apply in both areas of CT surgery and general surgery, and at times vascular surgery. You can, of course, interview at the same institutions for both pathways or multiple pathways. And it can be helpful to organize your application in such a way that there are at least distinct components of general surgery and I6 applications, such as letters of recommendation and personal statement. Sometimes it can be tempting to use the same document for all application requirements, but it's very difficult to do that when you are tailoring your application for a very specific CT pathway versus a general surgery pathway. So it requires a little more work. 4+3 programs are inherently able to understand this need to navigate both communities because they're designed to be serving that bridge. So I think I think most people dread writing a personal statement, but it's important to recognize that everyone has a different style of communication, And instead of thinking about writing it in one specific way, you should instead think about making sure that your personal statement conveys certain key elements. For instance, awareness is an important thing that people look for. Does this applicant understand what they're signing up for? And is their understanding of the field longitudinally informed, nuanced, and perhaps even holistic? I think not only understanding the positives that draw you in, but the negatives that are, you know, a natural part of your training process and becoming a CT surgeon demonstrates a certain degree of maturity and stability. And I think this ties in nicely to the degree of commitment. Obviously, a program is signing up to train someone for 6 to 8 years, working together 60 to 80 hours a week through very grueling operations at times. So you want to understand that this person's passion and dedication are longitudinal and self-evident, as opposed to being ephemeral. So you can mention things, of course, that you've worked on in the past that substantiates your deep interest. People who are able to do that, I think, are able to convince programs that they're very serious in what they're signing up for. And lastly, I think one very helpful way to tie all this together is an overview of one's professional or career goals, because it requires thinking about who you are and what you're interested in the field, as in addition to what you have done already to demonstrate that interest. So what are your goals, and how do you think you can best get there? These types of discussions lend very nicely to a personal statement. Upon this foundation, I think you can, of course, try to convey something extra about yourself, whether it be something historical, personal, family related, something that requires creativity, ingenuity, or even tenacity. These are ways to make a personal statement really stand out and unique for yourself as an individual. Highlighting your accomplishments is a huge part of your application. And oftentimes people look at not only your grades, but research history and awards you may have obtained. These are important ways of conveying your current and future potential for productivity and impact in the field. And you are listing your publications, grants, and other additional degrees you may have obtained on your application. I want to briefly mention that it's not just about quantity. Quality is more important. And additionally, I think publications and grants and etc. are an important way of demonstrating something about yourself, such as, you know, does this person show intellectual curiosity, genuine intellectual curiosity, and can this person find ways of moving projects forward, even when it, you know, may be difficult to do so, even when it may require coming up with new creative and entrepreneurial ways of doing so, and can this person ultimately see projects across the finish line? I think these are important things that can become highlighted in the pursuit of completing research projects. Additionally, academic potential and advancement in the community is an important part of what keeps CT surgery so exciting and passionate as a field. You know, you can demonstrate your involvement by having applied to travel scholarships to major societies and attending the conferences early on. By attending conferences and meeting your peers, you may even find opportunities to be involved in student organizations and other peer-to-peer leadership opportunities. These are ways that you can help your peers or provide additional resources for people who are interested in CT surgery early on. And I think it's always something very fruitful to do. I should also mention that away rotations are a very important part of your application and auditioning process. I think undoubtedly and anecdotally, auditions can substantially increase somebody's chances of making a good impression and matching at a program. Of course, the caveat here is that I think it's also a very expensive process and not something that everyone gets to partake in to the same extent. So it's a potential source of inequity as well. Lastly, letters of recommendations is an essential part of your application, and you can look towards faculty from home institutions, from away rotations, your personal or research mentors, and the identity of this person is important because if this person has been practicing for a long period of time or teaching or working with residents, extensively, that carries a certain amount of weight. At the same time, that's not the only thing that matters. I think you also want to consider your relationship with that person. Does that person know you very well? And can they speak to your character and potential beyond what is just written on your CV? Sometimes very superficial relationships can be a regurgitation of content on your CV, and you want someone to be able to speak to more than that about you. And lastly, depending on who that person is, that person may be able to offer you connections or insights into particular programs or networks. Perhaps that person has trained at a different place or worked at a different place previously, and these relationships will become very resourceful for you as you consider interviewing at different places and potentially even attending there. So this is a very important part of your application that should not be overlooked.
Thank you, Dr. Hahn, for that excellent presentation. And I'd like to remind everybody that if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A, and we'll try to answer them either through the Q&A or live after the presentations. At this point, I'd like to introduce Dr. David Cooke, and his presentation is on the ERAS application season program signaling.
Great. Thank you very much, Rita. Thank you, Steve. And thank you to the Thoracic Surgery Medical Students Association and the TSRA for providing this wonderful opportunity to talk to, it looks like about 140 medical students out there in the ether. So my name is David Cooke. I'm president of the Thoracic Surgery Directors Association. And I want to give a ERAS interview season update for this upcoming cycle. Specifically, I'll talk about the status of in-person, virtual, and hybrid interviews, the TSDA's position on such, and then I'll focus on program preference signaling. I have no disclosures. So again, we'll talk about the TSDA recommendations on in-person, hybrid, virtual interviews, and program preference signaling. The TSDA agrees with the AAMC interview guidance for the 2023 and 2024 recruitment cycle. The TSDA recommends the following. For I-6 programs, as well as independent traditional fellowships for our recruitment cycle, the TSDA recommends virtual-only interviews. In addition, the TSDA recommends that the second look offerings are also performed virtually. This is the statement from the AAMC. The AAMC recommends that residency and fellowship programs use a virtual interview format. Reducing the cost of interviewing is a critical step in widening access and improving equity. In addition, specially specific studies indicate that applicants prefer virtual interviews, and virtual interviewing is consistent with the commitment academic medicine has made to reduce our environmental impact. So virtual only interviews and virtual second looks are a recommendation of the TSDA. However, our recommendation does not supersede the policies, guidance, and mandates of the individual training program's local graduate medical education GME office, as well as the policy of their local designated institutional officer or DIO. We understand that there will be a heterogeneity in the interview process for the 2023 and 2024 recruitment cycle, with various programs opting for virtual only, hybrid or in-person only interviews and second look activities. But we are encouraging our training programs to follow interview best practices. We have provided this information to all of the program directors for all of our integrated and traditional training pathways. And this information is readily available for the AAMC. These recommendations provide steps to success for virtual only interviews, hybrid, meaning the applicant could choose an in-person or virtual, as well as in-person only interviews. So again, we recommend virtual only interviews. However, the mandates and the policies of the local program environments supersedes this recommendation. Now I'm going to talk about program preference signaling. So what's new to my ERAS for the 2023-2024 interview cycle? For those applying to integrated residencies, you'll have the opportunity to provide updated experiences. You can provide new geographic information or geographic preference, and then adding program signals, which can be seen by programs who opted in to program preference signaling. This is available only for the integrated thoracic interview process. It's not available for the traditional fellowship applicants. So as a reminder, what Dr. Hahn had mentioned, the thoracic integrated residency, you are a medical student or a recent medical school graduate. And for the traditional fellowships, you are a general surgery resident applying in traditional fellowship. So what is applicant program signaling? Program signaling will be part of the 2024 MyERAS application. There is no more supplemental application. Programs will need to opt in to receive applicant signals through ERAS account maintenance. A program signal is an applicant's opportunity to express their genuine interest in a residency program and are designed to be used by programs as a single data point among many data points available to them. Programs may struggle to identify interested applicants, and applicants struggle to stand out to programs of interest. The goals of program signaling are to improve the ability of applicants to obtain interview offers from programs of particular interest and to improve ability of residencies to identify applicants with particular interest in their program. So these are the number of applicants to thoracic surgery integrated residency programs in the last interview cycles. This includes US medical students, Canadian medical students, and what are called defined as foreign medical graduates, so the total applicant pool. And you can see in the last applicant cycle, we had nearly 200 applicants, with peaking in 2021 at over 300 applicants. And this is the average number of applications per integrated thoracic surgery program. So last interview cycle, there are 34 integrated programs, each receiving an average of 122 applicants. And this is the number of applications per applicant. So again, there are 34 integrated programs, and each applicant in the last cycle averaged 21 applications. So what is the problem? Again, programs may struggle to identify interested applicants who are truly interested amongst that over 100 application pool. And applicants may struggle to stand out to programs of interest. The goals of program preference signaling are to improve the ability of applicants to obtain interview offers from programs of the most particular interest to them, and to improve the ability of residencies to identify applicants with specific interests in their program. A system that program preference signaling is a system that provides applicants with a defined number of signals to send to programs of interest. Programs receive a list of applicants who have sent them a signal. These programs have no access to other programs' applicant signal history, and queries of applicants' signaling choices is strictly prohibited. This is a credible method for applicants to inform programs of their interests. It improves the distribution of interview offers, and it reduces quote unquote interview hoarding, especially in a virtual interview environment. And it promotes applicant equity. Many applicants are eliminated from consideration at interview selection phase, and formal signals may highlight applicants that programs may not have considered otherwise. So it is considered a win-win. So what is the approach? For the 2023-2024 match cycle for the thoracic surgery integrated program, each applicant will have who decide to participate in program preference signaling will have 3 signals per applicant. All signals carry equal weight. Programs will not be able to see what other program applicants have signaled. And applicants are not expected, or should they, signal their home program or programs where they completed a visiting elective. The logic is, by definition, those programs know that you're interested in them if you're from that particular medical school, or you already did a sub-internship or a visiting elective with them. So therefore, you can use your signals on other programs who would not naturally have that insight in your preference. So an applicant sends a signal to the program. That program will see that signal if they have opted in to participate in program preference signaling. An applicant does not send a signal to the program sees no information is displayed. And an applicant skips the process altogether. Again, no information is displayed. So the source for this is the AAMC. So it's designed to protect the applicant. So what is the impact of signaling? Signaling has been done in other residency programs, including general surgery, obstetrics gynecology, and otolaryngology, to name a few. This is data from obstetrics gynecology. The dark green is 2022 interview cycle. The light green is the 2021 interview cycle. And obviously, students from their were more likely to get interview offers from their home program. That makes sense. And they were more likely to get interview offers from their places where they did visiting electives. And these bars represent students who participated in program preference signaling, and they were more likely to get interview offers compared to students who didn't participate in program preference signaling. This is the ENT data. What they did is they looked at their applicants and they divided them into quartiles based on the amount of interview offers that they received. And so first quartile received the most offers, second, third, and fourth appropriately. And this is the 2021 interview cycle and the 2022 interview cycle. And the dark blue line are individuals who participated in program preference signaling. And for all quartiles, they received more interview offers compared to other cohorts. Now, what about equity? So this looks at the probability of receiving an interview invitation by gender. Again, this is ENT, otolaryngology data. And this is the predicted probability of interview offer. And the light green are women applicants, and the dark blue, the light blue are male applicants. And on the far right here, if a woman or a man participated in program preference signaling, they had a higher probability of receiving an interview offer compared to women and men who did not participate in program preference signaling. And again, this looks at underrepresented medicine status. The light green are underrepresented medicine students. The light blue are non-underrepresented medicine students. And whether you are underrepresented medicine or not, you are more likely to receive an interview offer if you participated in program preference signaling compared to if you did not participate in program preference signaling. Now, we will prospectively collect and analyze the data for program preference signaling and for this upcoming interview cycle, and we've tasked the Thoracic Education Cooperative Group to do that analysis for us. Other things to consider, we're not doing a deep dive today in geographic preference signaling, but real quickly, in geographic preference signaling, an applicant indicates a preference for up to 3 U.S. Census geographic divisions. And applicants can indicate preferences for training in an urban, suburban, or rural setting. Programs who are not in any of those geographic locations would not see those preferences for that applicant, again, geared to protect the applicant. However, I encourage you to go to the AAMC website and the resource libraries, do a screenshot of this slide. As well, there's a wonderful video from AAMC that does a deep dive of all these concepts in the upcoming My ERAS application. And I encourage you to visit our website at tsda.org. Again, thank you very much. And I really appreciate the time to talk to all of you today. And congratulations for making the decision to applying to thoracic surgery.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Cooke. I know you have to run, but there was a question. I don't know if it was answered. Do applicants know which programs have opted into signaling?
That's a good question. I think they will know, they will be able to see what programs have opted in. There was a due date for programs to opt in June. The TSDA really reached out to every single program to alert them of that due date to opt in and to encourage them to opt in as well. There's the answer to that question. But again, specific answers will be on the My ERAS application as well as the AAMC site.
Great. Well, thanks. I'm sure you will be able to find that. I mean, all of this process is done in the favor of the applicants. It's not, all these types of nuances aren't done to hide things from the applicants or the medical students. So obviously, some of the things that are done, like signaling, is for your advantage. And so you should be able to know. I would be surprised if that weren't let out. Okay. So I'm pleased to present Kathleen Berfield. She's again the program director at the University of Washington in Seattle, and she's going to talk about a new concept for thoracic surgery. It's been done for other programs, but she's going to talk about what's called a universal interview offer date.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to introduce the universal offer date to you all. In an effort to improve transparency, predictability, and decrease the overall stress associated with the recruitment season for our applicants, the TSDA, on behalf of the Integrated Thoracic Surgery Residency Program Directors, have implemented a universal offer date for the 2023-2024 recruitment cycle, such that it is recommended that all integrated thoracic surgery programs release their first round of residency interview invitations on the same date. The adoption of a universal offer date is in keeping with the national recommendations by the Coalition for Physician Accountability, the Association of American Medical Colleges, and the Organization for Program Director Associations, and has already been adopted by many other surgical and procedural specialties, such as plastic surgery, orthopedic surgery, urology, obstetrics and gynecology, otolaryngology, and general surgery. It is felt that the institution of a universal offer date will have many benefits for both applicants and programs. Specifically, it creates a common timeline for the interview invitation process, which provides structure and predictability for both applicants and programs. It is felt that this will be less disruptive for applicants on busy clinical rotations, and it removes the pressures on applicants to respond immediately to interview invitations and eliminates the first come, first served processes of prior years. This also provides programs protected time for holistic review of residency applications and improves the efficiency of scheduling interviews for both applicants and programs. And most importantly, it allows all of the applicants protected time to plan out their interview season thoughtfully, which should decrease the need for late interview cancellations. Based on the experiences of other surgical programs, the timeline for the universal offer date is as follows. Programs will extend initial interview offers to applicants on Friday, October 27th, 2023, in their usual fashion. There will then be a 24-hour moratorium on communication by either programs or applicants, which allows the applicants protected time to thoughtfully review all of their interview offers and plan out their interview season. This essentially gives applicants the remainder of Friday, Saturday, and the majority of Sunday to plan their interview season without feeling pressured to respond immediately. The applicants should respond to interview invitations with an acceptance or a declination by Sunday, October 29th at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and 12 midnight Eastern Standard Time. This will allow on Monday morning, October 30th, for programs and program administrators to then start scheduling and confirming interviews at the start of the business day. If programs have unfilled spots for interviews after this first round of scheduling, they can then start sending out additional interview invitations as they see fit. There are no additional recommendations for the second round of interview invitations. Central to the success of this process is a mutual commitment by applicants and programs. Applicants should commit to reviewing all interview invitations and thoughtfully planning acceptances, respond before the Sunday night deadline, and to not hold interview spots they do not realistically plan on attending. The integrated thoracic surgery residency programs will commit to waiting to confirm and schedule interviews until Monday, October 30th, to only offer as many interview invitations as interview spots are available, and to guarantee an interview on one of their interview dates if the applicant responds by the Sunday deadline. And also to publicly report participation in the universal offer date, either on their website, social media, or in communication with the applicants. While participation in the universal offer date is recommended by the TSDA, it is not mandated, and therefore programs and applicants are on the honor system to participate. Once again, here's the timeline for the universal offer date for your review. We truly hope that all programs and applicants choose to participate in the universal offer date this year. Reports from other surgical specialties by both applicants and programs alike indicate that the institution of the universal offer date has been more beneficial to the recruitment process than limiting. And we feel that these changes will help decrease the stress on our own I-6 applicants and will promote the holistic review of applicants by programs. Thank you and good luck for a successful recruitment season.
Thank you, Dr. Berfield. That was an excellent presentation. And again, want to remind everybody to put in the Q&A if you have any questions. So now I'd like to introduce Dr. Tong. She's the program director at Duke, and she's going to present on general surgery versus 4-3 programs versus I-6 programs.
Good evening. My name is Betty Tong. I'm a general thoracic surgeon and the incoming program director for training programs in thoracic surgery at the Duke University Medical Center. It's my privilege to be here with you tonight. I'll be discussing the various pathways for training, so comparing and contrasting the integrated 6-year program in thoracic surgery, the joint training program, and the traditional or independent training programs. As a matter of background, the American Board of Thoracic Surgery is the entity that is responsible for certifying people who practice thoracic surgery in our country. It is also the entity that administers the qualifying or written exams and the certifying or oral exams in thoracic surgery. And the ways to become certified in thoracic surgery are one of 4 training pathways that are recognized by the ABTS, and we'll discuss these in the next few slides. So from the ABTS website, there are 4 specific pathways to eligibility for certification in thoracic surgery. Pathway 1 includes both the what I call independent or traditional trainees, as well as those in the accelerated fast track or joint training program. These are people who will or have completed a full general surgery residency and then go on to train in thoracic surgery. So the traditional person is someone who completed 5 years of training in general surgery and then does an additional 2 or 3 years in thoracic surgery. The fast track or 4-3 or joint training program trainee is somebody who began their training in a general surgery program and then midway through transitioned to this combined pathway where they will, at the end of their training, have completed 4 years in general surgery, 3 years in thoracic surgery, and thus be eligible for certification in both general surgery as well as thoracic surgery. The second pathway is for people who have done general surgery, cardiac surgery, or vascular surgery in Canada. And this is all we'll say about that pathway. The third pathway is the integrated 6-year thoracic surgery residency program, or the I-6 training program. We'll discuss that a little bit more in a few minutes. And finally, the fourth pathway is for people who have completed an integrated vascular training program, so a V5, who then go on to train in thoracic surgery in a 2 or 3 year approved residency program. So really what we'll be talking about tonight are the people included in Pathway 1 and Pathway 3, the traditional, the JTP, and the I6. We'll start with the traditional or independent pathway. As I described, these people have finished 5 years of clinical general surgery and have done rotations through the various surgical disciplines. In many of these programs, there is potential for dedicated research time, somewhere in that 5 years of clinical time. With regard to training in thoracic surgery, the interview and match process happens typically during the PGY 4-year. As I mentioned, the thoracic training programs for people training in this pathway are 2 or 3 clinical years, depending on the institution. Following ACGME approved training in thoracic surgery, these people can go on to do subspecialty training in areas such as congenital surgery, transplantation, or general or minimally invasive general thoracic surgery. People who train in this pathway are board eligible by both the American Board of Surgery, so both in general surgery as well as by the ABTS in thoracic surgery. And as of 2022, there were 91 positions available at 75 institutions. The fast track or the joint training program are for trainees that have matched into general surgery, and again, midway through their general surgery training, transition to this 4-3 program. This transition often happens after the PGY 2-year, but can be institution dependent. These trainees do have some exposure to different fields of surgery prior to full commitment to training in cardiothoracic surgery. As with the independent trainees, people in the joint training program do have the opportunity for double board certification by both the American Board of Surgery as well as the American Board of Thoracic Surgery. Some potential disadvantages to training in this pathway is that it can be challenging to learn and be good at both general surgery as well as thoracic surgery simultaneously. Acceptance to a joint training program in general is not guaranteed. At least at our institution, the application process involves discussions among the general surgery program leadership as well as thoracic program leadership, and it is truly an application and match process. At last count, there were 19 programs available. There are not a necessarily consistent number of positions or available every year across the country. Finally, the integrated 6-year pathway involves, as the TSDA describes it, comprehensive and rational total immersion in the diagnosis and management of cardiovascular and thoracic diseases. So this is really to be completely cardiothoracic centric, if you will. The training programs do involve exposure to and training in interventional radiology, cardiology, endovascular surgery, oncology, and pulmonary disease. I believe that this training pathway is for the applicant who is absolutely 100% sure that they want to be a cardiothoracic surgeon. Some potential disadvantages of this pathway is that it really does provide little room for exploration of surgical specialties outside of those really closely involved with cardiothoracic surgery. And probably the biggest barrier is that it's highly competitive. At last count, there are 38 positions available at 34 institutions across the country. This is a paper that's actually in press at JTCVS, published online, looking at applicants to integrated thoracic surgery programs and really comparing them to other disciplines traditionally known to be highly competitive. So this is orthopedics, otolaryngology, plastic surgery, neurosurgery, and the integrated vascular programs. And they looked at data from the NRMP, ERIS, and the AAMC. Of all of these specialties, the match rate for thoracic surgery in the integrated programs was lowest, and at 31.6%. Of the people who matched to integrated thoracic surgery programs, these applicants had the highest average step 2 scores, had the highest proportion of people in AOA, and the highest proportion of people graduating from those considered to be top 40 medical schools. You see in the figures on the right that over the past several years, the number of positions available and the number of institutions has remained relatively constant, with some fluctuation in the number of applicants to the I6 programs. And that the average number of applicants per position is about 3, which leads to the 31% match rate. So in summary, here's a table comparing the various training programs. We see that the match timeline differs for those finishing their medical school curriculum versus those currently within a general surgery program. The clinical years of training varies among the 3, but as we'll discuss in a minute, I don't think that that should be a strong consideration for anybody who's aspiring to be a thoracic surgeon. The training institution varies between the joint training pathway programs, the JTP applicants, as well as the traditional applicants. Those who are applying in the traditional pathway can move around between institutions if they wish. The big difference between the training pathways in terms of board certification is that people who train in an I-6 program are not eligible for certification by the American Board of Surgery. And again, the number of programs and institutions varies by pathway as well. I'm often asked which training program or which training pathway I think is best. And to be completely honest, it's like asking me whether chocolate ice cream is best or vanilla ice cream is best. There's not one best way for training. Really, the best pathway for any one individual is the one that's right for their specific interests and circumstances. And for those of you who are applying in this cycle, I would strongly consider your goals, your interests, and your preferences when deciding how to construct your applications and your ultimately your rank list. Some final considerations, I think, should include your clinical interests. If you really like thoracic surgery, but you maybe like other specialties as well and are not 100% committed, then I think it's important to consider applying in general surgery as well, and to strongly consider matching into a general surgery program where you'll have options to either go to a joint training program or apply in the traditional pathway. If you're absolutely committed to doing academic surgery and really want to have some research time to explore scholarly interests, then think about the integrated programs that offer research time or the general surgery programs where research time is built in. Sometimes geography is important. Sometimes there are other personal considerations that are important. And I think that for each applicant, the mix of priorities might vary. And again, I urge you to consider the relative importance of each of these as you consider how you want to construct your applications. I do not think that choosing the fastest pathway, really the I-6 pathway, is necessarily the right thing to do. What we do in our profession engages us for a lifetime, and we're really involved in lifelong learning. There's not a magical transformation that happens once you're finished with your training and begin as an attending surgeon. So just because you might finish sooner in an integrated pathway doesn't necessarily mean that it's better or right for you. Remember that all of these pathways ultimately lead to ABTS qualification and certification, and that the best pathway is the one that matches your interests and your qualifications. Thank you for your time and your attention, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Tong, for that excellent presentation. So at this point in time, I just want to remind everybody that the remainder of this webinar will be an interactive panel discussion. I'd like to invite at this point Dr. Han, Dr. Berfield, Dr. Tong, and Dr. Yang to put the video and their mics back on to participate in the panel discussion. And you can continue to use the Q&A and we'll try to address all of your questions. I'm going to actually start out with a question. There were several questions on the different pathways. So I'm going to start with Dr. Tong. How is it viewed to apply to both the I-6 and general surgery programs at the same institution? And how do you make the general surgery programs feel like they're not second choices when you're dual applying?
I think that's a really good question. I think the short answer is that it's very institution dependent. For several years, we actually interviewed I-6 and general surgery applicants during the same weekend when we were having in-person interviews to avoid the added expense of bringing that person to our institution a second time. Obviously, with virtual interviews happening, that's been mitigated a little bit. More recently, we have made a change to completely independently consider applicants in each program to avoid any appearance of collusion or deal making, if you will, between the programs. I think my best advice really is just to be honest and to be genuine. I think you're right in that nobody wants to feel like they're second fiddle. You can express a desire to do cardiothoracic surgery, but really the statistics are fairly daunting, and I think any applicant would be smart to increase their chances of matching somewhere in March of 2024. And you can express your interest in that general surgery program, that you know it's great training, that it will set you up for ultimate application in cardiothoracic training should you choose to apply through the joint training program or independently. Don't try to be someone that you're not, most importantly.
And just a question that kind of tags along to that. If you are doing a general surgery sub-I, should you let them know that you're interested in a 4-3 program at that point in time?
I think I would. I don't think it hurts to let the general surgery leadership know what you like and what you're interested in. And many people who come to our institution for general surgery training either express an early interest in cardiothoracic or develop one over time. And I think that's one nice thing about having different pathways for training, is that people come to cardiothoracic surgery at different stages of their careers and of their education. And having different avenues for those people is, in my opinion, really important.
Great, thank you so much. I am going to ask Dr. Yang to put his American Board of Thoracic Surgery hat on right now. And there's a question in the Q&A about can we expect to see more residency spots for the I-6 and a decrease in the number of traditional spots?
Well, thanks, Rita. Actually, that's my ACGME RRC hat.
Okay.
I know it's confusing. I have 3 different hats to wear. So, just in full disclosure, what Rita was talking about, I'm the exam chair for the American Board of Thoracic Surgery, so I run all of the examinations processes for certification and maintenance certification. I'm also on the Residency Review Committee. What that organization does is we review all the programs in the country, all the CT programs in the country, and make sure that they're abiding by the rules, general things like 60-hour work week, 80-hour work week, 80-hour work week, feedback and teaching and all that. So there's several questions in the chat about, are we going to increase integrated I-6 positions? Well, in order to do that, it's very complicated. So basically, what you have to do is you have to increase your complement of the number of integrated residents. So, but you also have to decrease your traditional program. So say I have a integrated program, I do 1 resident per year. So it's a 2-year fellowship, and I'm going to take one of those programs, one of those positions away and do an I-6. Well, the problem is that then instead of me paying for one position, I have to pay for actually, I have to have money for 5 extra positions because I'm going to have 6 residents for that one traditional fellowship. So it's not as easy just to switch over because not only do you have to have cases. So again, if you're going to have all these residents doing cardiothoracic surgery, even if they're in their senior years, you have to have enough cases to be able to train them. So that's why I think Betty had shown those graphs, Dr. Cooke had shown those graphs, that there's just sort of been a marginal increase in the number or pretty much flatline because it's a complex swap because it's not only a monetary issue to support those 6 residents, but also to make sure there's enough training for them. Money doesn't grow on trees, that who pays the residents is actually the institution. And so if we don't have enough money or the program doesn't have enough money, then it's very difficult to do.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Yang. There is a couple of questions here on research. And so I'm going to ask Dr. Berfield, what is your suggestion for people who are doing research? There's a question here on should you get a letter of recommendation from your PI if he is not medically related and you're getting a PhD? Does the type of research matter, whether it's cardiothoracic or not? And what about being named on papers, but not necessarily being the first or last author?
I think it'd be unlikely for y'all to be last authors at this point. So I think that one's fine. But I think that the letter of recommendation thing is a hard one to navigate. And ultimately, I think what the majority of programs are looking for is that your letter of recommendation writers can speak to your clinical capabilities and your research capabilities as well. So a lot of it depends on your home institution and quite frankly, what the rest of your application looks like, right? So if you're, as I review things for applicants, if I see that they're coming from an institution that I know of that has not just pass fails, that has good MSPE explanations and rotation explanations that are strong, and it says that that resident performed well clinically, I don't need as much kind of reassurance from letters of recommendation that they are clinically strong applicants. Whereas if you're at an institution that has perhaps pass fail, that doesn't have an honors, high pass, kind of pass sort of delineations, like having a letter of recommendation from somebody that can speak to you clinically rather than can speak necessarily to just your research skills is potentially something that's going to benefit you more. I hope that answers, and I'll defer to some of the other PDs and former PDs on here that can speak more to that.
No, that was a great answer. And I'm just going to ask one more question, then let Dr. Yang ask some questions. So this is going to be kind of a dual type of question between me and Dr. Han. So one of the questions here is, what advice do you have for students without a home program? Well, my advice to that would be try to do a sub-I rotation if you don't have a home program, maybe 1 or even maybe 2 sub-Is to those programs that you're specifically interested in, and that would be helpful. So in the second part of that question, I am going to ask Dr. Han is, what do you feel is the optimal timing for your away rotations as far as your application process?
Yeah, I think just to briefly touch on the first question as well, I recently looked into this because I frequently receive emails and texts from applicants who are coming from institutions without home CT surgery training programs. And I do think it is a logistically very challenging process, given that so much of what I think took for granted when I was a medical student, such as reaching out to a research mentor or shadowing operative cases and forming relationships with educators in the field, came as a result of being on a campus that had such proximity to it. And I think some of the advice that could be offered is that, attending conferences and then starting research projects with residents and faculty members from other institutions early on can offer a small bridge up front. But ultimately, I agree with you that having some real genuine clinical exposure by doing away rotations is probably the best way to form lasting relationships in that regard. As for the second question, in terms of timing of away rotations, sometimes it's hard to say exactly what month for each applicant because every med school curriculum is going to vary in that regard. But the sweet spot that I think of is that I think when you're doing an away rotation, it probably shouldn't be your first CT surgery rotation, because then you're going to be asking a lot of questions that could probably have been answered while you were doing some of your early on rotations in whether it be general surgery or home cardiothoracic surgical rotations, or picking up some basic skills that you would ideally have already acquired so that you can show them off a little bit at your away rotations. At the same time, I think it shouldn't be too late, because oftentimes those away rotations, in terms of obtaining further connections or asking for letters of recommendations, could become very helpful to an applicant. So the way that I look at it is that it should fall somewhere in the middle so that it's before the application deadlines, but after you've already obtained some exposure and experience in the field of CT surgery.
Thank you very much. Dr. Yang, would you like to field some questions, please?
Sure, thanks. There's a couple questions in the chat for international medical graduates. So they're a little bit all over the place regarding application processes. I'll first start with just a quick statement that if you're currently in a training program, but you're not a medical student, but you're in a training program, you can't just match directly into a cardiothoracic fellowship. Our programs in training are all, as I mentioned my other hat earlier, you're ACGME certified, so accredited. So basically you're matching into an ACGME accredited program. And so in order to do that, you generally need to be from an ACGME accredited general surgery program. So unfortunately, you'll have to start all over again in that regard. But the questions do center around the obvious, how do you get into a program? What type of letter should you do? What are the chances of getting into any of the 3 training paradigms? So I'd like to hear from all of you, maybe Betty, Kathleen, Jason, and Rita. So Betty, any advice for our foreign medical graduates?
Well, I think that doing everything you can to make your application stand out. That sounds a little bit generic, but everybody has a story to tell, an individual story, and making your application convey that story and underscore what makes you special and why that program should interview you and consider your application, I think is really going to make the difference. It's, I think, in the personal statement, it's in grades, it's in your letters, it's the whole thing. I don't think there's one thing that that's going to make somebody stand out. Certainly there's one thing that can make you stand out in a bad way, but I would use your personal statement to really convey why you want to train in the US and why the programs should offer you an interview.
Kathleen?
Yeah, I think also, many institutions offer like international away rotations and things like that. And so I think that whenever you can, and there's an opportunity that's reasonable and realistic to take to spend time at the institutions you're interested in applying to, that can be helpful as well, or to do research with them and things like that.
Jason?
Yeah, I certainly recognize that it is a less well-defined and a more challenging process. The examples that I've seen of very successful applicants have taken very, at times, circuitous courses, taking on multiple research years consecutively, really working with a specific institution and then perhaps even doing a preliminary year in something and then switching to a categorical year and then maybe even switching again. I've seen many different iterations of this. And so I think that ultimately having a very persistent interest and passion for pursuing CT surgery and sticking with it, as much as I like to offer a very specific advice, is ultimately something that's going to prevail. And I think we see that reflected in some of the past and current leaders in CT surgery who may have come from search pathways as well. If you read some of their stories, it really has required some tremendous feats and persistence through what ended up becoming either a very long or oftentimes relying on serendipitous interaction. So it may not be a very satisfying answer or a specific answer, but I do think that having that degree of perseverance and looking out for opportunities by taking on things as they come to you is probably the best way.
Rita?
I have to agree somewhat with what Dr. Han said and also what Dr. Tong said, because I think your personal statement delineating exactly where you came from and how you got here is important. And I also believe that if you take on a research project in an institution and show that you have that ability to lead, that can be helpful as well. And again, it is a circuitous pathway, but it can lead to a residency in CT surgery.
Great. I'll just give some anecdotal experience. I've been here for 30 years and I don't have anything specific for CT surgery, but I do know that people who are more successful foreign medical graduates, they come here in a preliminary spot. I think there's been a couple questions, how should I apply for a prelim or categorical? But I think if you are a foreign medical graduate, the likelihood of getting a position, I think, is a little higher if you go the prelim route. Perhaps you'll be lucky enough to be asked to stay for a categorical position, or you'll find another categorical general surgery position somewhere else. You might match into a 4-3 program, and then ultimately finish that general surgery program and match into cardiothoracic surgery. So longer. I think the odds of doing that, I think, is probably a little bit better than just matching directly into an I-6 program. But I think that would be my advice if you are trying to figure out which pathway to go. I think the prelim general surgery route is probably a higher chance than just trying to get an I-6 position. There's still a few questions about who you should get letters from. Jason, I know chair is always the best, but what have you or your colleagues usually advise?
Yeah. When I applied to the integrated pathway, I got one letter from the chair of surgery at our institution, general surgery, because it was something that was customary for us and something that we all did. And I actually did several general surgery rotations prior to applying so it wasn't just a letter to fulfill a checklist. And I obtained a letter from the chairman of cardiac surgery at our program and my research mentor additionally. And then my fourth letter came from rotating at one of our satellite locations from the program's chief there. So it was 3 cardiac surgeons, 2 in clinical capacities, 1 in research, and 1 general surgery letter. I really don't think that there's, having now read a lot of letters as well, I don't necessarily think that there's a magical combination that conveys someone, in the best light. I do think that the content of the letter is what ends up shining through. If that is somebody that you have built a meaningful and longitudinal relationship with and have really shown some good qualities throughout, those words come through much more so than combination of, whatever combination of identities you may put together for your rec letters.
About Betty or Kathleen, what kind of letters do you like to see?
I like letters that I think it was Dr. Milewski who said, or Dr. Berfield, I apologize. Somebody said it should not be a recapitulation of your CV. The letters need to have some demonstration of the fact that that person met with you or knows you, A, in a clinical capacity, and B, can speak to your the qualities that are going to make you a good member of the house staff, whether it's an example about how you help to take care of a patient, or what the house staff said about you, or whatever. Something besides what is written on your application is really important. I find that many chairs letters, just because of the number of letters they have to write and the number of people they have to meet, can be a little bit less personal. But at least one of your letters should be able to speak to the qualities that make you an exceptional candidate.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that we're really looking for them to kind of give more insight into who you are as a person, as a candidate, who you'd be like as a resident, someone as a peer to train and to work with. And I think one of the things I always recommend to anyone who I'm writing a letter for is to give me a bio sketch, right? Of kind of taking me through their timeline and to comment on things that might not be mentioned in their ARIS application elsewhere, or gaps in training, or special experiences, or personal experiences that they're okay with you sharing, because they might have a relationship with you or know something about your, family history or personal history or work history that they're not sure if they're allowed to share, if it's something kind of sensitive. And so being able to give that insight to your letter writers is really useful, so that we can really draft a letter that's really going to highlight kind of who you are.
Rita, you have any comments on that?
Well, I agree with that, what is in the letter of recommendation, I think is extremely important. That's something that sets you apart, and it should speak to your personality, and it should also speak to, especially if you are is coming into a traditional program, it should have some kind of indication of your skills, because that's extremely important, that the general surgery program director or the chair or the chief or whatever does make some kind of a comment on the skills as well as your personality.
Yeah, I would also add, again, it doesn't have to be the chair, as Jason said, they may not know you. All they know is that they're just regurgitating your CV. You got to get somebody who really knows you, and then somebody who really writes letters of recommendation. I look, there's little things in there that we know experienced letter writers know what to write. So usually it's somebody more senior, somebody with a title, somebody who can can maybe stress some of the things. I always ask my students who ask me to write a letter, what do you want me to stress on your letter? I'm not going to regurgitate your whole life's history. So what do you want me to stress, or what may be different than what you just submitted? So anything new that you want me to talk about. So it has to be a little bit different than the rest of the CV. We have a few minutes left. So Rita, I'll turn it back to you.
I guess one of the last questions here, I'm going to address Dr. Tong on this, is when applying, is there any benefit specifically for people who have an MD, PhD? Is that looked on any differently than other people who have just done a couple of years of research?
That's a good question, and I think that's probably an individual programmatic response. I to some degree, yes, our program is very interested in training people who want to be academic cardiothoracic surgeons, and having an MD PhD demonstrates a significant time investment in scholarly activity. That being said, if you're not a hard worker or don't demonstrate some interest in the clinical side of things, then I'm not going to be that interested in offering an interview. So I think that's a very individual program and individual applicant question. It's hard for me to say in any sort of a blanket fashion, yes, that's a good thing, or no, that doesn't matter.
Dr. Berfield, any comment from you on that?
No, we have the same approach. I think that, it's, it really comes down to the rest of you as an applicant and the rest of you clinically, right? And for some people, the PhD can be helpful, and for some it's time away from clinical rotations, and it's not always. So really, in those cases, we look at your letters of recommendation and your rotation grades and things to determine if you're going to be a viable candidate or applicant.
Okay.
Okay,
Any other questions?
I guess we time is short. We need to wrap it up. So I'll start with again thanking the TSMA for setting all this up. They did all of the work. So congratulations to John and Sammy, Gianna, and Ben for doing this. I know they have part 2 coming up on Friday, so half of it's done already. And also want to thank our panelists, my good friends, Betty, Kathleen, David, and Rita for coming on tonight and spending their evening with us away from their families. And also, again, to our staff, Gracie and Adam, for their work behind the scenes. So, Rita?
Well, I think that you hit on the high points. I want to thank everybody for their excellent presentations. I want to thank all of the participants. Your questions were extremely good. They were well thought out and led to a very robust discussion, which is, I think, the point of having this webinar, is to be able to discuss these topics, which are confusing to applicants at this time of year before they start sending in their applications. I also, again, would like to thank the TSMA for putting this together, as well as the staff of the TSDA, Adam Doty and Gracie Martin. And just wanted to make sure that the attendees please fill out the survey. I think it's in the chat box, but please make sure that you fill out the survey for us.
And we will also send out the survey via email to all of the registrants as well.
Thank you.
Yes, and we'll post the recorded version of this, as will the TSDA staff. And we just wanted to give one more thank you to TSDA for not only being willing to do this, but wanting to be the ones who present this information to us. It means a lot to have your support and to hear this right from you all. So thank you all, and thank you to our participants for coming. Hope you got to learn something today. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Right.